You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast here on BQN and the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kelvin, and with me today, it's Amy and Christos. Hello, hello, hello. Amy, she's back. I've not seen you because we took the week off last week. You've been trotting about everywhere, having a great time.
Yes, I had to go visit some Trek family out in Nashville. Hello, boys. Had such a wonderful time. We played a Star Trek trivia game I just barely opened it and brought it with me to Nashville. It was TOS, so it's a little difficult for me, but some of the questions were so easy. Like you had to go to different planets, and after each planet, the questions got increasingly difficult because you would move from one pack to the next pack. So the first planet questions were hilarious. Like, what were the color of the boots? And it's like, is this a trick question? Black? What were the color of the pants? And I'm like, this has got to be a trick question. Black? I mean, so some of them were just very, very easy. But once you got going to the other planets, then the questions progressively got more difficult.
Ooh, I can't believe you did a trivia without me.
I know. That's the only time I will play because I don't want to lose.
Calm down, Calvin. Calm down.
I know, I'm being triggered. Do you know, yesterday I purposely didn't attend the Galaxy Class Live episode because it was trivia with Jim. And I thought, it's not about me. I'll just listen in the car and scream out the answers as usual. Let the guys have their moment. How was that, Amy?
You know, it was really fun. Jim and Keith came on. They wrote the questions. They even had some picture trivia. So we were able to do that, and it was live. We had some listeners that were, we actually gave them points if, they guessed it, but we didn't. And the listeners got more points than I did.
Wow.
I came in dead last. So we have very smart listeners. Thank you.
Well, I look forward to listening that this week when it drops. And how are you, Christos?
I am good. I feel like I've been in a little bit of a temporal vortex myself. I had a very long business week of travel and whatnot, and it was just kind of go 24/7. And it was a weird week that I did not pay much attention to social media. I even at one point I had to mute our BQN chat just because I couldn't. There was too many notifications, and I was in the moment. I was like, I'm just missing everything, but it's okay. Life will go on. And I did survive. But it is kind of feel like I'm kind of catching up with things this weekend. But yeah.
Good stuff. At time of recording today, it is the 5th of November or November 5th. Does that mean anything to you guys in America? Because it's a little bit of a pagan holiday here in the UK.
I only know it because of the movie V for Vendetta.
Yeah, so it is Guy Fawkes Night or Fireworks Night, as it sometimes is called. And it's an very old holiday about a guy who tried to set fire to the Houses of Parliament in a big political revolt. So, and he was called Guy Fawkes, and he was burnt at the stake. He was tried for treason against the monarch at the time. So now on the 5th of November, there is a bonfire, and you create almost like a scarecrow, a little effigy, and you pop it on the top, and it's called the Guy, and you have a bonfire and burn it. It's very, very dark when you overanalyze it. But it's for children. It's strange.
Yeah. Oh. It's funny. I think we could make that January 6th and just burn scarecrows at Trump.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. But it would literally be like the storming on Capitol Hill type event.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Exactly that. And, Trump is burned alive anyway. So, yeah, happy bonfire night. So I know. And can you see the fireworks behind me outside my
Yes.
window?
I can now. Actually, there they are. Look at
Oh my
that.
gosh.
Listeners, there's actually fireworks going on behind Kelvin.
Right on cue. I didn't even arrange that. Right. Well, I hope there's room in the escape pod because we've got a double serving today. So let's get on with it.
This is the bridge. All hands to emergency escape pods.
Escape pod. I always feel weird when Mark's not here. I feel like I'm stealing something from him.
I know.
He's taking his bit.
So, guys, this week we send a fond tata to Lower Decks for another year. So we've got episodes 9 and 10 to discuss, which fortunately was a two-parter. So it's all worked out very well for us here on All Good Things. Was it a pleasant ending? How did you find it, Amy?
I really loved it. It made me so laugh. That looks like Tom Paris. I can't see it. And they did it twice. Hilarious. And I will be talking more about this on Union Federation. So I'm going to save a little bit for that. But I loved seeing Mariner finally get to her own. Sort of how with Strange New Worlds and Uhura felt like she belongs on the Enterprise. It's sort of that feeling that's like, okay, Mariner's here. She's ready to serve and be in Starfleet.
I loved the callback to First Duty. I didn't, what's kind of funny is I kind of sensed Will Wheaton was going to make a cameo, but I didn't mind him in a flashback. I thought it was really fun. The whole flashback, they got so many details right there at Starfleet headquarters, including if you look at the one shot of that, you could see Boothby working. I really, really, really enjoyed this two-parter a lot. And it started to, there's a lot of details that it was starting to pull in together. And there were some really nice tie-throughs and some details.
Yeah, Christos, you had mentioned the Lower Decks hasn't been your must-see TV. How have you felt now for this season?
Well, I liked the last two episodes a lot.
Okay.
And I'm glad. And one of the reasons I've been struggling with it this season is the Mariner storyline was just dragging out for me. This whole, we fix her every week and she just kind of regresses it's kind of like this ongoing thing. So yes, we finally, I think, got Mariner in the right place. And I think that's a good thing. So I liked that a lot. The whole Nick Locarno thing, I felt like it was, the whole 2 episodes was very fan servicey. But the one Star Trek show that I'm really fine with that is Lower Decks. So it's just part of the whole, what makes Lower Decks is it can be very fan servicey. Like the whole Battle of the Mutara Nebula being kind of recreated. I was so excited, and the music cues there. I'm like, this is good.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 things I want to comment on. First of all, the ship. So Nick Locarno's ship, everyone was like, what is it? What is it? There's been a lot of things on social media of side-by-side dorsal, ventral shots of that ship with the Delta Flyer from Voyager. And they are identical outlines. So it was such a clue that it was Nick Locarno, because you've got Tom Paris with the Delta Flyer and then Nick Locarno with that ship. So that's what I love it that I didn't crack that code, but that head in hands moment of, oh, now I see it. So well done, Mike and the team. But I loved, and it was so subtle, I hope you picked up on this, Christos, the linking of it to Picard season 3.
Oh, yeah.
With, we're looking for missing Starfleet former Starfleet officers, Beverly Crusher and 7 of 9. So I was like, yes!
It really ties together that Bev left the Enterprise shortly after Nemesis, and that she would not be there. I thought that was really cool. I was going to bring that up, but you did. Thank you for that. Oh, yeah. I loved that Nick Locarno's headquarters was looked like V'ger, like that whole. If you're when they were flying through V'ger, and there's that whole thing, that looked. I think that was on purpose, especially the way they did the lens flare part of it. I was like, that's very V'ger.
Yeah, I think it was a good send off. Obviously, it gave us a little bit of a cliffhanger with Tendi. So we don't know what's going to happen there. But I think Lower Decks is established enough now that they almost do the cliffhangers for a joke and then it just gets wrapped up straight away in the next episode.
Yeah.
So I don't perceive there to be any real risk that we will lose Tendi. However, we do have Talin now. So who knows if the actress didn't renew.
Well, I think that's perfect. I think you will see Tendi next year, but she might be 2 or 3 episodes with the Orions. But then you have, to your point, Talin to kind of fill that gap with the 4. So you'll still have your crew on the Cerritos. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but I am really enjoying that like Carol Freeman is not being portrayed as incompetent, that she's earning respect in Starfleet, and she's being smart about things, and that's great. And I like that Boimler ended up in command for a little bit, and he actually didn't lose his shit. Like he was doing the whole Captain Kirk pose, and did you notice that when they were pulling in with the tractor beam, he was doing the Kirk pose on the bridge? I was like, oh, all right.
And his captain voice.
Yes. Yeah, he was.
So we're seeing growth with these officers. Not only have they started to get promoted, that we're seeing personal growth. And depending how long Lower Decks goes, are we going to see almost an undermining of the premise of the series? Because the Lower Deckers are no longer the Lower Deckers. They're confident. They're in senior staff meetings. They've kind of bridged that gap to the command crew. So I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, it's really hard to write a show about people not making the decisions that matter. So I totally get the conundrum that they are in. And you just can't have them not be promoted. You have to have them grow. So where are they going to grow? Well, they're Lower Decks. So we need to promote them, or we need, and it's the tough place to be sort of cornered when you're writing a show like that.
Yeah. And I feel like to a certain extent, we have passed that already. They are, I mean, if Boimler can be put in command under regular circumstances, like there wasn't anybody, like, all right, we've already kind of crossed that line, but I like that Lower Decks is not going to be The Simpsons, where it's Bart Simpson in the 4th grade for 30 some seasons, and that we're going to progress in the Star Trek timeline, and we're going to move toward events. Like we're probably a year or 2 away from like the big Romulan supernova, and if Lower Decks goes another year or 2, it's going to catch up to that, and we'll get to see more.
Absolutely. So from our final contacts for the moment with Lower Decks, let's go into the theme of this week. And we're continuing our first contact storylines here, and we are going to be discussing The Next Generation Season 3 episode, Who Watches the Watchers? Who would like to give the listeners a little bit of a synopsis of what happened in the episode?
While covertly monitoring a proto-Vulcan species at a Bronze Age of development, an accident leads to cultural contamination and a prime directive dilemma, with the inhabitants of Mintaka 3 believing in a new god, the Picard.
I believe in the Picard. Do you, Amy?
I do believe in the Picard.
I think we all believe in the Picard. It's kind of like our core values as people. So I'm fine with it being a religion.
That leadership book of him behind me.
Yeah. How many times have we actually said about kind of our friendship group, our Trek family, our coming together, that it is almost like a religious experience, that we all have the same belief? So it's quite ironic, the attaching of the religion aspect to this episode. So I didn't realize until I was doing my rewatch today just how significant this standalone episode is to a lot of the continuity and the canon within
things that came after, right?
Yeah. So I found it quite useful to just make a few points and notes around it that I think the listeners would just enjoy us discussing for a while. So I've made a list. Do you want to pick a couple off that list, Christos? What appeals to you? What speaks to you?
This whole canon connections thing. First off, I'll jump to some of the other ones down here, or maybe on the next go around, but I the duck blind, I just love. And as soon as we got into Insurrection, I thought of this episode. I remember being in the theater watching Insurrection and immediately thinking back to this episode because we brought the duck blind back. But with what I was going to say was the first thing that popped to my mind on rewatching this time around was, I guess those hollow suits were kind of new in Insurrection because, that would have been one way to pursue trying to find the missing crew member would have been to put on the camo suits and go looking for that crew member. And then you could just run around.
Never thought of this before, but if we're allowed to put cloaking devices in clothing, how is that not a Treaty of Algeron are we breaking it's not on a ship, it's on a person, but we're still inventing cloaking technology in the Federation? Naughty.
The whole duck blind thing, though, like, it pops up several times in Star Trek. It's a major canon connection that I believe started here. And I will throw this out too, is like, this was beginning of season 3, and I was literally probably 12 years old, 11 here. And I remember, like, I was so thrilled. Just the show had gotten so much better, and even at 12 years old, I could see that. And it was like, wow, they're doing these grand things outside. And it looks so, like, I know the word now. It's like, oh, it looks very more cinematic than, say, the season 1, season 2 episodes. And, they're shooting on location more. And I just remember, like, I just remember liking this episode a lot the first time I seen it. So,
yeah. It seems very classic Star Trek. I know we talk about tropes a lot, but this seems very just genuine and a pure story of morals and ethics and high, making people better people. So yeah, I loved it. What about yourself, Amy? What kind of stood out in this episode, canon-wise and continuity for you?
All right. Well, I hope I'm not going to steal this, but it's here. And I did not even make a reference or remember this, but in Allegiance, what is that, season 6?
It's
5?
still season 3.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
really?
just towards the end of the season.
It's later in the season, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was way later. Okay, so if you guys remember, the Bolian cadet, he references this mission to Mintaka 3, which is this episode. And that's why Picard questions him and is like, might be the imposter because a cadet wouldn't have known about what went on at Mintaka 3. Yeah. So there's your clue. I like it.
I love the Picard showing Nuria Mintaka 3 from orbit. And I can't profess that I came up with this grand connection, but Picard does it 4 times throughout TNG and including the movies. He will show a woman, and I don't know if the gender is anything to do with it, but he shows a woman their own planet from space. And then in First Contact, when he obviously Lily is one of those women, he mentions that it was the perfect moment. Sorry, I beg your pardon. We're back on Insurrection. He says to Anij that this was his perfect moment when time stopped, when he saw his home planet from orbit. So with it being such a moment for Picard, he tries to replicate this by doing it to other women. So I've mentioned Lily in First Contact. We have Nuria here. Do either of you know who the other 2 are? Can you remember? I'm quizzing you.
Okay, it came to my mind. I'm just guessing, but is it Data's android mother?
Not so much. It's not one of my 4 that I have.
Okay, all right, okay.
So one of them is season 1 and one of them is season 4, if that helps.
I know, I had it and then you kept on talking and it went away from me.
Is it Tasha Yar's sister in one of them?
Okay, let's give you a clue. The lady in question wasn't wearing many clothing at the time, and she had a really bad blonde perm.
Justice.
Yes.
That's right. Yep.
So he shows the Edo lady. Yes. Yeah. And then the other one would equally be, and I'm sure we will discuss this at some point, in our First Contact series. It's the episode First Contact. So who does Picard bring aboard?
It's
BB
Newworth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the minister lady who is played by Commander Torres, Carolyn Seymour.
Yes, that's
Right,
the
and
one I
scientist.
remembered, not Justice. I remembered that one. What was the name of that episode?
First Contact.
Yeah.
That's a good episode. I got to watch that episode in sci-fi class in high school.
Wow,
the teacher put that on for us. The teacher put that on for us, and we watched it one day, and we did a discussion on it the next day. This is Deerfield Sci-Fi senior year of high school. I think things you remember.
Wow, I wish I had a teacher who showed me Star Trek in school. That'd be amazing.
It was like I got an A in that class. It was an English elective.
Any more canon connections on that list jumping out to you guys?
I'll jump the one that's designed for me. Bev being Bev. So beaming the injured to sickbay, to hell with the consequences, like Lily in First Contact. This actually reminds me a lot of the friction between Picard and Crusher in this episode is very much reminiscent of Symbiosis, and it's kind of a picking that up. Like they debate the Prime Directive a lot in that episode, and it's like right back there. And that whole like, well, you should have let him die. Like, we were responsible for his injuries, you know. Like, and Beverly's just like, I'm the doctor, you know. Like, it's just like, and I was on Team Bev in this one, you know. That was like, you know, yeah, they here we are showing up on this planet, interfering with them, and when our technology goes wrong, they get to die. Yeah, I think Beverly is doing the right thing. But Picard obviously is like, you know, you can tell the manager in charge, right? Like, yeah, no, you should have let him die. It's very militaristic of him to, you know, almost in a way to have that outlook. But I love that. Once again, I think Gates was only back. This is maybe the third or fourth episode of season 3. And this is one aspect. I mean, it took a long time to get Beverly right again after her being gone. This was one area I felt like she's jumped right back into the role, and she's having that, not afraid to get into it with Picard.
Okay, so this is the first time that we get Riker's surgical alterations to fit in undercover. Now, do they go back and forth between being surgical or being prosthetics? Because like we just saw in Strange New Worlds with Spock, when he was human, he had prosthetic ears. I thought that was really cute, little in joke there. So I really wonder, is it surgical? And then did they move away to prosthetics? Because I feel like I've heard them say, you know, you go get your prosthetics.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point, Amy. I think that jumps back. You know, you have, Chapel on Strange New Worlds, who's genetically manipulating people to physically look different. And I think Riker was genetically, I think they did do some things to him in that First Contact episode that changed him. But then if you take episodes like Unification, but when you take episodes like Unification, like I got to, Dr. Crusher's measuring to do prosthetics. So, the thing that jumped to me about the undercover part was the implantation of communicators into their bodies. And I'm like, why didn't we ever see more of that in Star Trek? Because obviously, that's something that makes a lot of sense, and we should probably have seen more of through the years, especially like on a dangerous mission or something, like where you could be like a diplomatic mission where something could go wrong and they can take your communicator. If you've got a chip in your brain, they got something to, they could scan for you, they could beam you up. Maybe it just makes things a little too easy, so we can't do that all the time.
Great point. It's right in all the kind of shows where they'll say, "Oh, they're wearing a wire." It's a great technique, but maybe it would have lessened the stakes if it wasn't used. But I thought it was used very well here. I particularly like that humor with Troy, the old translate what that meant. Great. Here's another you may appreciate, Christos, the reference to Dr. Pulaski indirectly, where it talks about wiping Liko's memory. And Gates's delivery when she just stony faces looks at Picard really sassy and just says, I am familiar with Dr. Pulaski's technique.
Yeah. I've always loved that line. And I mean, I caught that snarky attitude way back when, but I was like, I just wonder, was that a director? The director, I wonder who the director of this episode is. Was that something that they coached her to do? Or was that Gates and just kind of, or maybe it was Gates and Patrick, kind of because we all know more and more about how Patrick felt about things too. So I don't know. I think Amy's doing the research at the moment, but yeah, I would think that could be either an actor's choice or a director coaching that person to do that. But you're right, Kelvin. It's spot on. It's kind of like, it's very meta, right? Because it's like Pulaski and Crusher would have no real reason to dislike each other. Crusher chose to leave the Enterprise in universe and came back, right? So there'd be no real reason there for that. So it's more of a meta reference to real life. I don't know.
Yeah, it was directed by Robert Weimer, so I'm not familiar with his work.
Doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to believe it was Gates being Gates,
Yes.
and I love that.
We'll take it.
Finishing off with Gates, this was the debut of Beverly Crusher's long lab coat, all of season one. She only had the little hip length, and this was the first to the ankle.
Yeah. This is one of the very few episodes, by the way, that you can tell that in the beginning of season 3, Beverly's wearing the 2-piece uniform. She had a 2-piece uniform as well, and it took a couple episodes in before they're like, no, those full body suits work better for the women, and they changed it back. But when she's leaning down before she beams up the guy on Mintaka 3, you can tell that she's wearing 2 pieces, and I think that went for quite some money when they did that Christie's auction a few years ago.
It's really interesting you say that, because when I was rewatching this morning, the scene in the around the conference table, the way Gates is leaning against the table, all of her uniform is all bunched up, so it didn't sit well on her body. So you can see it. Interesting.
Why they probably made we're gonna, and I don't think that the women quite had the problem with wearing the stretch suits the way the guys did. So, or at least they complain. I think women are probably more used to that. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say we just don't complain about bad clothing and shoes. Okay, so another reference to Mintakans. I mean, they're just getting referenced all over the place, even in Discovery with "Will You Take My Hand?" The Mintakans were wiped out by Emperor Georgiou and Captain Killy in the Terran Empire. So again, this episode, this Mintaka 3, really fits in, like you said, this canon connection.
Yeah, Kelvin, your list here is pretty extensive, and it's a lot for a one-off episode.
Yeah, I'm going to finish off with actually my favorite. The tapestry that Picard is given at the end is seen in Picard's quarters, draped over his desk chair for every episode and movie, except Nemesis, where you were in Captain Picard's quarters. So the gold tapestry over the purple chair is this one from this episode. And I just think fantastic prop continuity. Amy is a god.
He's right.
Jaw on the floor.
Yeah, I did not even notice that. Oh my gosh.
I like this whole little canon connection thing here. I feel like we're in an episode of Galaxy Class where they're doing a Batleth battle here, and while we talk about the importance of episodes, and this one has a lot.
Okay, well, now that we've kind of dissected the detail, let's be a little bit more thematic here, returning to our prime directive. The message in this episode was that concept of being programmed to fear what is different. The way the Mintakans, in particularly Liko, were afraid of the Picard, and then the reverence and the god complex of it. It got me thinking of Star Trek holding the lens to society then and now. Is this just an extension of us here in 2023 with the prejudices that still exist in our society? over here in the UK, there is a lot of controversy about immigration. And a lot of the political parties, and I know obviously Trump had this with you guys, but a lot of the political parties will say we need to take control of our borders, stop immigration, and that propagating fear of all of these people coming over. They're all different. They're going to undermine the sovereignty of the UK and erode our culture. And it's just feeding that hate of these people are different, whereas more enlightened people like us would see it as an opportunity to gain and learn and coexist. There's that fear culture of you're different, stay away. We've not even touched on homophobia. So all of this rings true from this episode with me. What about you guys? What do you think, Christos?
Kelvin, we could talk for 5 hours or more about this whole topic here, because you're talking about globalism versus nationalism or isolationism. And, there's this whole trope that, some of these wars and conflict are just allowed to happen so that you do have this refugee crisis. So then you do have this ability to stoke fear and into people. And that's how you get more right-wing people into office. It's this mechanism of war. I mean, without getting too political, if you look at what's happening in the Middle East right now, I mean, too late. We're already political, but that's fine. We're Trekkies and we're allowed to talk intelligently about topics. We shouldn't shy away from that. The whole Netanyahu had every warning before this thing happened, right? Every warning, but it was allowed to happen. So that why we can then justify further to do things that we want to do. You can't necessarily, get your nation behind you going to war until you have a breaking moment or something that excuses it, right? So you have that whole thing, and it just like you said, then you have the people that are doing the drumhead type of thing to stoke fear and then allow society to move in a certain direction. And I think this episode is very, 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 very Roddenberry-esque in the Star Trek thing. And Gene Roddenberry was still very much into things when this episode was made. But I will say, it's like, looking at an educated person versus who's has a more worldly view. I'm trying to think of the character's name in this episode, the one that Picard brings up to the Enterprise. Nuria versus the outlook of someone like Liko, who has this very God-fearing type attitude. I mean, the contrast between the two characters is huge. I'm going to stop there and let someone else talk.
No, I agree with everything that you're saying. And like when Riker and Troy first go in, it's Nuria that's like, everyone is welcome here. Like her welcoming, it was just like so commonplace. And it's like, can't we just do that? And you're right, Christos. Like when you were talking about immigration and refugees, it's like you have a choice on how you're going to look at it. Are you going to go down the road of fear and no, you're going to destroy what I have? Or are you going to look at it as an opportunity of what can I learn from them? We're going to be even greater. They've got my back. I've got their back. Like we can build on the strengths instead of fear the weaknesses. And Nuria and Liko describe both of those paths perfectly. And the one that I just absolutely love is when Liko, I keep wanting to call him Loki because I'm watching Loki. Liko is trying to predict what God wants. Yeah. And that has always annoyed me. Okay, not always. Since I left the church and people saying, oh, God wants me to do this. I don't understand. Why are you giving up your free agency to air? I mean, there's not a physical body. We can all agree, all Christians, all religions, there is not a physical body that is God. I think we all can agree on that. So if there's not a physical body telling me, then I'm not going to presume what they want. I can't even presume, and I know and love you guys a lot. I can't even presume to know what you want. Like, that's just insane. And the audacity that you would think, oh, I know what God wants is insane. Okay. Getting
I know.
heated,
Okay.
but I
You know,
love that. So I'm gonna, pass it off and let someone else talk.
go ahead, Kelvin.
Just to kind of what I drew from this, and I don't know if it was by design, but it was certainly the way it came across, certainly as an adult rewatching this episode, is the manipulation that you've got me saying Loki now, Amy, that Liko uses, because his end game is that he thinks this can bring his dead wife back from the
It's his
above.
motivation, yeah.
So his motivation to kind of keep Troy tied up and to shoot her and to get everyone to do what he wants is because he wants his wife back. And sometimes that's the danger of religion. When it goes bad, it can kind of make people do things that the crowd behavior aspect, all based on a belief. So there's a lot in this episode that is a little bit thought-provoking and a little bit dangerous.
Yeah. Amy, I will just say, don't ever be afraid to be passionate, because that's the best part about if Star Trek and the things that the writers and producers embody into the script, if it can get us passionately talking about something in an intelligent manner, that's what Star Trek is. This literally is what Star Trek is all about, listeners. And sometimes, we may say something that gets a little controversial, but you know what? If we can't have adult discussions in a well thought out manner, then it's the whole point of it. So I love that. I think there's a whole passage on this book, or this episode in this book I have called The Ethics of Star Trek. And it's, written by a college professor, and I'll grab it here next time when you guys are talking here. But it's a great book that really just jumps into ethical situations. And I know this is a classic episode. This could also be a TOS episode, by the way, in my opinion. It's just done obviously in a more modern environment with better special effects and whatnot. But I feel like this would be very much a dilemma that would be debated by Spock and Kirk and McCoy. I could see this episode being done with that cast,
as well as obviously the lens and the issues we've just discussed. This episode does give us, and bear in mind, this is still very early on in TNG's run. It's the very beginning of season 3, so we're not hugely established, but this gave us some great Picard being Picard moments of the speeches, the passion, and that scene in the transporter room when Nuria comes aboard and he gives this long speech of touch my hand, feel my pulse, don't kneel down in front of me, I do not deserve that. I found it so moving. It is, you couldn't get that from Kirk, Janeway, Sisko. This is Picard at his best and being written in an amazing way.
Yeah, that moment with Picard, and and then she will do something that regresses, and then he's like, oh man, I just can't get through to you. And it's like, I sort of feel that way when I'm trying to present someone who has a differing opinion, like the science, the facts. And it's like, here's fact A, here's fact B. So from those facts, we can make this conclusion that is based on facts. And there is something so strong about belief and faith. And I find it interesting because even within that family, like Liko and the daughter is so excited to be learning the science, and she's in charge of recording the time sundial thing. Like, she's very scientifically minded, but was raised in Liko's, I'm going to say, moderate, right? Because he's still very superstitious, and he quickly believes in a god instead of believing in the science. So I love that Star Trek shows different sides of an issue.
What I was going to say was, it's just really frustrated that this episode just kind of shows shows the two kinds of people. And, Amy and Kelvin, you guys were hitting on this too. It's like there are people who will think about things, who will be fact driven and data driven and can critically think. And then there will be those who want to just anything that they can't explain, just, push away and call it whatever, call it God, call it religion, call it, there's some things that we just don't know. But, as we progress as a human race, or if you want to talk about the Mintakans, Picard did a really good job of like, well, how would things look, to people who lived 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago? The technology that we have now would seem like magic. And that, I don't know why people can't stop and think about that now. Like, if when you can say that just as clear as day in 2023, why would you not come to think that, where could we be 500 years from now or 1,000 years from now? So I don't know. It's just it's hard not to think about this and not kind of get angry too. So you got to kind of have to keep your, kind of keep your cool. But it's like, yeah, how can you, just, to Amy's point, just try to draw conclusions in what someone else would want you to do, and then say, I can take a life in the name of that person, or I can tell you, you don't have the right to exist, Kelvin, because, that person may think it's wrong. And I can, use that as an excuse for my prejudice.
One thing that Picard did with Nuria is, say, okay, well, your people 1,000 years ago, didn't live in huts, and huts are better, right? So that progression, I don't know if you've read the book Factfulness, I think is what it's named. And it restored my faith in humanity, because when you look at progression from a distance like that, like over 1,000 years, over in this book, like over 1,000 years, 2,000 years, like where we are today as a society, look at how many of us have cell phones, like these conveniences. Now look at the severe poverty, the number of people living, dirt floors, very, very few compared to what it was 500 years ago or even 1,000 years ago. So there is progression. And so I feel like if we can see the progression and just try to continue that, we won't be mired down and get it's so easy to get frustrated and disappointed. But we are doing better as a human kindness. It's just hard sometimes.
I think it's important that we kind of maintain that belief. A light only shines in the dark, and there's a lot of light around us with Star Trek and our Trek family and our beliefs. I'm going to take us away from this kind of philosophical, and let's be a little bit more creative and fun. It got me thinking of Lower Decks, in that they have gone back to the planet from Symbiosis, and even the series opened with the episode Second Contact. So as we discuss this episode through the lens of First Contact in this First Contact series, I couldn't help, gosh, sound like Carrie Bradshaw then. I couldn't help but wonder, what would Second Contact with the Mintakans be like? Because they know, they've had the experience with Picard. We explained things, we left them to it. And the closing lines, please remember my people always. So if the Cerritos goes back 20 years later, what are they going to find on Mintaka 3? What do you think? Have you got any out there ideas, suggestions? How would Mike and the team make this funny?
I don't know how they'd make it funny. I would predict that they would have made a big jump in 20 years, that because they know that anything's possible, and they know, I think it would make them very focused on technology and science and, whatnot. And so I would hope that there'd be a betterment of the people. Definitely. But you can only do so much in 20 years, especially given that they're, we see, as they say, technology, the curve of technology gets steeper and steeper and steeper as time goes. If you look at like the 1900s, for example, where we were at the beginning to the end, as it progresses, everything just starts to move faster. And we see that now. We keep progressing faster and faster and faster. And so, but when you're starting off from a more primitive part, like as they were, you're only going to be able to do so much in a 20-year period. But I would think they'd almost be entering into an age of enlightenment, and I think that would be probably where you would want them to, where they would have to visit it. How you make that funny is not my job. If I could master that, I'd be in a different career.
How about you, Amy? Have you got any thoughts?
No, and I just keep going back to the Orville when they had the Kelly and she became the god.
Oh,
But they did a great job in that they were able to show the future, and that yes, society had united and don't have any of those isms, sexism, homophobiaism, whatever. So I don't know how it could be funny, but I feel like if they're so focused on science that maybe something funny that you could exaggerate is them being all science, but then not developing, say, like their social norms, or, and then they're, I don't know, stupidly rude to each other just to get the facts, just the facts, ma'am. Something like that, maybe twist it like that. I don't know. What do you think, Kelvin?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little more cynical. I like the idea that Starfleet has taken their eye off the ball and not continued to watch them. And then 20 years later, we go back and, they've got a big statue of Captain Picard, but it's become a bit of a negative thing. And it's almost he's abandoned them. So, and like words have crept into the dialect of like, that's such a Picard, that in a negative connotation. So, but I find that could be done in such a funny way that the Cerritos crew would have to unengineer and undo some of that. So yeah, I like the Mintakans being a little bit neglected rather than Christos. You're a little bit more wholesome than me. You like to see the better in people. Shall we move on to some assimilations and regenerations? We haven't got many for this episode because it's so thematic and the canon connections are so vast. We've discussed most of them. So do you want to start us off, Amy?
Okay. Yeah. There's so much to love that I'm just going to jump to regenerations. And sort of what you were saying with the canon connection of having their memory wiped from season 2 pen pals, I just feel like that's too tropey and too soon to be using, oh, let's wipe their memories because we're going to do that all the time. But then it doesn't even work. Like, don't say you're going to do something and then not have it work. There's another way. I don't know. I just didn't really care for it. And I didn't even care for it in pen pals either.
Yeah. I mean, you could talk about, a whole episode on the ethics of what they do, say, to Sharzhenka, and what they attempt to do in this episode, what they do to Kern and DS9.
We don't know the long-term effects.
Well, but who are you to decide that someone should lose their memories? I mean, that's
well,
playing
the Prime
God,
Directive is.
Well, but that's I get the in-universe, the explanation they give us in these episodes for sure. But isn't that a flaw of the Prime Directive? Maybe the better way for that is what I'm trying to say is what gets to make, Captain Picard or whoever a god to say that you can violate somebody by, having them by taking something from them, and you are taking their memories and their experiences away from them. And, it's controversial. I would say my regeneration or whatever would probably be my comment I made a little bit ago about the lack of the cloaking hollow suit that we later see in Insurrection. Obviously, it just hadn't been thought of yet. That's the reality of it, and it makes things a lot. It makes things in Insurrection a lot more interesting, obviously. But I think it's just one of those deals where in the in-universe, it doesn't feel quite right, but we know why it is. So
I put a regeneration down for the guy Palmer at the beginning of the episode when the explosion goes off. He is like flailing around and basically jumps out of the duct blind. There's no reason he should have fallen out of there. And it was very original series-esque kind of really bad choreography.
And I guess another regeneration to just tack right on top of that. Why wasn't there a window or a pane of glass or a pane of whatever that, there? It's just open.
Um, okay, is this an assimilation or a regeneration? I don't know. Really love the Riker Troy connection that they have there. I mean, obviously, we are 3 seasons in. We know they have a past. They've been flirting, and so when Troy is walking out front and Riker's behind, obviously it being female, and then the male is behind. And so then that has to be so, because if anyone wants services, then they need to talk to the female. And I was thinking about it this morning and I'm like, oh yeah, that's fun. And they just played it for a joke, because the joke is that that's not our normal, right? The man is in front. And then I was sort of going even more meta, and it's like, that's not even funny. Like, that's having one person being in control, i.e., slavery, of another person. So if you want to do anything with that, then and I'm like, that's not really funny. I know why they did it, to sort of flip it on its head, which is why we have episodes of a matriarchal society, because we don't see it here. We are so patriarchal. And so I like the flip, but then when I really think about it, it really needs to not be gone, because one person should not be in charge of another person.
I'll make you feel better about this, Amy. So when you show it from the other point of view, you point out the absurdity of it, and then you hopefully get people to think about, well, if you don't like the woman leading the man, think how it might feel to the woman. Think, you leading the woman. So that's how I can be fine with that, because you're just, but when you show the opposite, you show the absurdity of it. I like to also think that this part here, this whole little side part of it, was probably Marina and Jonathan keeping the two. They talk about how they kept them as a couple throughout the years, and it was the actors that kind of kept that chemistry there. And I feel like this was a lot of them in doing that. So
Agreed. Yeah.
Not a huge amount of trivia to go through for this episode, because I guess the canon element is the trivia in itself. So really just a special shout out to good old Vasquez Rocks, the well-known filming location that we got so much Star Trek in, was used for this episode for all of the exterior scenes.
Okay, so Vasquez Rocks is in the desert in California, and it was 100 degrees out there. And I don't know if you're familiar with desert insects, scorpions, So they're out there, and they were instructed to not wear any perfumes or deodorant. Think about that, in 100-degree desert weather, so that they wouldn't attract any insects and get in the way. So that's a little bit of torture. How would the actors union feel about that nowadays? I don't know.
How much wardrobe they must have went through. Like, you probably had to have several costume changes per day, just because of the perspiring and things like that. Deodorant or no deodorant, you're just, Amy, this, when it's 110, things just don't go well. So, and you're trying to keep people looking sweat free and hair perfect, and then not having pit stains, and I'm sure they changed uniforms. I think about, like, some of those guys were, they're wearing their full wool suit when Geordie and them were on it, and Beverly had to wear her full thing and her lab coat and a wig. And that probably was not fun.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The things that they're forced to do in the name of TV and art. Yeah. I guess they don't want flies and scorpions. You're right, Amy. All of the shots. So these things we suffer. So if we may now then move on to final thoughts. This is only episode 2 in our First Contact series. So comparing to Strange New Worlds, Children of the Comet, which we previously covered, do you have a preference? Did one of these episodes cover the subject of First Contact a little bit better? What are we thinking?
I think this one definitely covers it better, more thoroughly. Like we've had lots of discussion about how it connects to canon and the philosophy of Star Trek, that how media it is. I don't remember having this in-depth conversation about our society versus the Men Talking Threes with Children of the Comet. So I'm definitely saying Who Watches the Watchers is an excellent, excellent episode. Listeners, please go back and rewatch it. I know you've seen it a million times. I know you can quote it and I know you know what's coming up next, but it's just, I put it on and I was like, oh, there's my Troy and Riker. I was so happy to see them again. But the issues that it brings up really is worth thinking about and analyzing. How am I going to recognize science over fear? How am I going to include others? How am I going to further my knowledge so that I don't become a stupid Lico?
Don't be a Lico. That's going to become our like little like short short catchphrase for when we're out in public, Amy. You're kind of encounter it. Oh God,
Right.
he's such a Lico.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What about your final thoughts, Christos?
These are both amazing episodes in their own right. Obviously, I enjoyed the conversation here because it's so thought-provoking of an episode. There's just is so much more that you can tie it back to society, 30 some years ago when it was made, and it's so relevant today is what I still like about it. So talk about standing the test of time. If I had to pick one over the other, I'm going to pick Who Watches the Watchers, but I still think they're both great episodes of Star Trek.
It's a hands down win for me, and I think we're all very much in agreement. This is a terrific first contact episode. It's, they just got it right in all aspects. I really enjoyed the rewatch. I didn't remember how much I loved this episode until the rewatch. So I'm very grateful, and I loved discussing it with all of us today.
What shows are on BQN, you ask? Well, here's a rundown of some podcasts you might be interested in. All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast covering all of Trek, hosted by Amy, Mark, Christos, and Kelvin. Bargain Bin Gamer, a YouTube show hosted by Davey, a self-proclaimed gamer who specializes in reviewing and showcasing affordable video games. If you're lost in the Delta Quadrant, check out The Captain's Couch, a Star Trek Voyager podcast hosted by Jeremiah sitting on Janeway's Ready Room couch. Cinema Z, a film discussion and review podcast showcasing films you probably missed but should definitely check out, hosted by Mark, Matt, and Laz. Beam Aboard the Galaxy Class, a Star Trek Next Generation podcast covering all of TNG, hosted by Amy, Joe, Rhea, and Kevin. History with the Szilagys, a snippet of historical events from around the world, hosted by Chrissie and Jason. For the newest Trek coverage, check out Infinite Diversity, hosted by Chrissie and Thad. Test your Trek knowledge with Trexperts Quiz, a Star Trek quiz show hosted and written by Davey. Union Federation, covering all things Star Trek and the Orville, which we all know is really a Star Trek show, hosted by Kyle, Kevin, Amy, and Haley. Spill the Tea with What's the Tea, Bev, a Trek current events and fan interview show hosted by Christos. And for our Patreon members, we have The Hive Mind, BQN's monthly roundtable discussion with hosts and listeners. It's Green, a cornucopia of topics hosted by Mark, and Amy's Math Moments, a quick look at math moments in Star Trek, hosted by Amy. We know you have a choice of podcasts to choose from, and we thank you for listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Amy, why don't you tell us where we're going next week?
All right. Well, since we were talking so much about the original series, let's go back and watch The Doomsday Machine, because we are going to be continuing part 5 of our Man versus Machine. Now, is this the Doomsday Machine that is showing up in Lower Decks? Is that the same?
I don't recall it in Lower Decks. The Doomsday Machine is like, it looks like the space worm.
It's like a big waffle cone attacking people in space, and you got crazy Commodore Decker, I believe, in this episode, and it's a good one. I actually know this one quite well.
Yeah,
Listeners,
one of my favorite TOS.
Oh my gosh, I swear to you, I have watched every episode, and I know I say this all the time, but I see the name like that, the Doomsday Machine, and I literally could tell you nothing about it. What is wrong with me?
Amy, it's not it. You know what it is? It's like students. You have students that are really good at school but don't test well. And then you have students that, that just test really well. That's Kelvin. Amy, your Trek. You're going to watch this episode and be like, oh yeah, I remember this guy.
Yeah.
And I remember that dirtbag Commodore Decker.
We would love to hear what you thought of today's episode, and we hope you'll join our Facebook group, the BQN Collective, to continue our discussion there. You can also reach us at All Good Things on Twitter and Blue Sky. Please follow the network on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at BQN Podcasts. We've also partnered with our friends at Fandom Podcast Network, where you can find us by searching the master feed. So, Amy, where can people find you when you're not getting all sweaty in Vasquez Rocks?
Well, when I'm not doing that, listeners, you can find me here on the network where I'm co-hosting Union Federation. I am on that Twitter X place at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place, BQN Collective, our Facebook group. And Christos, when you're not flailing outside of a duck blind, getting blown out, where can people find you?
You can find me on the socials at GreekGeekSD, mostly Instagram these days, but also the BQN Collective on Facebook. And Kelvin, where can people find you when you're not walking 3 steps behind James?
Wow. I am really taken aback by that one. That's a great one. Thank you, Krista. When I'm not doing that, you can find me over on the socials at Kelvin's Timeline, or indeed, like the rest of us, in our BQN Collective Facebook group. Please hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a star rating and written review. That helps others to find the show. You can also follow the entire network's podcasts with our master feed by searching BQN.
At this time, we would like to thank our associate producers, Mahendran Radhakrishnan and Tim Cooper. A special thanks to Graham Kelly for our opening and closing music, and to Mark for our artwork each and every week. Thank you.
If you'd like to help us keep our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We will add you to the Hive Mind Facebook group so you can enjoy It's Screen, Amy's Math Moments, and other network perks. With a monthly subscription of $5 or more, you can join our meetings on the Hive Mind Roundtable discussion the second Saturday of each month. Visit patreon.com/BQN to get all the details and watch your messages.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you'll join us as we search out
all good things.
You guys we're just hitting it on all fours on this one, or not all fours. We're just hitting it on all cylinders on this one. Jeez, you're gonna have to edit that, Kelvin.